Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to be here in a beautiful landscape ourselves. Very blinding lights, I must say. So it's great to be here, looking at how we can build the resilience of landscapes which are both the heritage, the patrimony, and the basis for livelihoods in the Sahel and all around the Sahara. It's an urgent task and it's an inspiring task. It's one that fills us with enthusiasm. We're going to hear from our colleagues in FAO that there's a huge opportunity. 166 million hectares in the Saharan Sahel alone could be restored to healthy, productive landscapes. That is the most important opportunity that we have, considering how much agricultural production is needed, how much livelihood is needed to confront the growing challenges facing the world. So we're looking to connect all the different initiatives and bring them so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And with you, the countries of the Sahel have been starting to do this through the Great Green Wall Initiative, which is something that we're very proud to be supporting, and we're really very enthusiastic about it. And we think it has the potential to expand beyond the borders of the Sahel, but also go to the north and even possibly to the south later. The idea is to restore the productive potential of drylands using a landscape approach, stop the advance of the desert, increase the productivity, bring security and jobs, and make it so that people are less inclined to migrate and leave, increase the ecosystems, stimulate economy, and mitigate and adapt to climate change. It can be done, but it's a lot of work. And that's what we're here to do, to learn about that work. The common challenges across the Sahel and the ties in the countries go way beyond national borders. These are centuries-old trading routes, centuries-old cultural links that we need to exploit and fortify in this new initiative. Livelihoods and ties that are threatened by climate change, land degradation, security, and other conflicts. And this is our challenge. This is one of the challenges of the world that people in this room are busy trying to address. Last year in Paris, the World Bank launched something called the Africa Climate Business Plan, which was our commitment to making a huge share of our lending climate friendly. In fact, the World Bank has committed to making, I think it's 28% of our lending climate friendly anyway. But just for Africa, they committed 755 million by 2024. This year, we're launching the Middle East North Africa Climate Business Plan, Climate Action Plan, sorry. And this initiative of the Sahel is a key part of that. Collaboration is really important, and that's another reason that we're here, to learn how to link up all the various initiatives. So we're very happy to team up with the African Union, World Resources Institute, German government, and other partners to launch this African Resilient Landscapes Initiative, ARLI. There's an acronym for everything, right? And this is a political umbrella that brings together the restoration initiatives, the Great Green Wall, Africa Forest Landscapes, which is Africa 100, and efforts to restore 100 million hectares by 2030. There's also initiatives on oases and dryland forests. And we want to build on these experiences and bringing the desert ecosystems and livelihoods and help the countries of the North Africa and Middle East bring those initiatives to them as well. So we have a $100 million program in Tunisia working on integrated landscape management, connecting agriculture, forests, pastures, and we're learning from all the Great Green Wall initiatives to help bring that to fruition. So already in the Great Green Wall, we've got 650,000 hectares, benefiting 3.5 million people. And we're trying to get double that by 2020. So that'd be 7.6 million people and more than 1 million hectares. It's really a huge initiative and one that you should all be very proud of. So we can see the gains in sustainable land management, and we can see that it's possible, and we can see that with financing and coordination, we can work together. We can build on the lessons that we've been learning so far. We can expand them to cover more initiatives and more places and more people. The so-called wall is actually a mosaic. It's actually a combination of different factors. And it's an integrated approach looking at resilient communities and resilient ecosystems. It's a metaphor for Africa's ability and willingness to confront these challenges and move forward into the future. You can count on the World Bank to be partners with all of you going forward, and we're really looking forward to learning about it for the rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Julia. And let me now ask to Simon Rittenberger from FAO, Senior Forest Officer, to please illustrate us all this landscape opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paola, and thank you, Julia, for a great introduction. I can shorten my presentation because you said a lot of important things there. So, yes, I would like to present, is the PowerPoint showing, or? It's on my machine, but it's not up there.
Here it is.
Is it? Okay, great. Right, so forward-looking commitments, mapping restoration opportunities. This was put together by a team at FAO, in fact, more than one team. A team led by Nora Baramuni, working on dryland forestry and the Great Green Wall, and a team led by Danilo Morricone, who works on Collect Earth, and I will show you some of their products. Here we go. So I'll briefly go through the overall goal of the Great Green Wall, the intervention area, and then we'll focus on the map of restoration opportunities, which is really what this presentation is focusing on, and some of the next steps. So the overall goal of the Great Green Wall, as Julia said, this is not a row of trees that is planted in the desert at the edge of the dunes to stop the sand. The Great Green Wall is a landscape mosaic where farming, livestock raising, and tree growing happen in an integrated way. And so this will address the challenges of food insecurity and poverty and forced migration, and of course also address climate change, both in the sense of adaptation and mitigation. I don't know if some of you have been in the negotiations, but in climate change negotiations, people like to separate adaptation and mitigation. This is a sort of mantra of our end-of-pipe climate change negotiators. But of course, when you're talking about agriculture and forestry, it is totally impossible to separate adaptation and mitigation, and even more so in the drylands. And so, you know, as I always say, I don't mind whether you talk about mitigation or whether you talk about adaptation with mitigation co-benefits. We all know what we're talking about. Better carbon storage and better livelihoods for people. The restoration is, of course, it's all about improving the resilience of human and natural systems, and the restoration is definitely a big priority for many of the countries that are present here, and many of the countries that are part of the Great Green Wall have actually pledged to restore major areas as part of this initiative. Okay, next slide. So here is a map of the northern part of Africa with hyper-arid, arid, semi-arid, and dry subhumid areas indicated. Of course, in our definition of drylands, everything that is not wet is dry. So you see that Harrison Carnwea from Liberia sees that his country is excluded. no offense meant, but you know, you could see that most of Africa is actually dry. There's 1.6 billion hectares of drylands in North Africa, Sahel and the Horn of Africa, which is 55% of Africa's land area, and it's also 11% of the world's land area. And then the core Great Green Wall area is defined as the area around the 400 millimeter precipitation limit, and that covers 0.8 billion hectares. Now, you heard Julia say that we have identified opportunities for restoration of about 160 million hectares, so that is about one-fifth of that core Great Green Wall area. So, the landscape. It's always good to draw lines on a map, but there's also people living there. 500 million people in the overall Great Green Wall area. And actually in the core Great Green Wall area, it's about 50% of those 500 million people, so 250 million people. So very clearly, when we talk about restoration in a landscape like that, we're talking about integrated landscape approaches. We're not talking about traditional fencing, excluding people. This is really about restoring trees in the landscape and restoring forests in the landscape. The land use distribution in the core Great Green Wall area is indicated. Interestingly, you will see that actually 11% of that area is forest. And this is something that we've been able to ascertain recently using a tool called Collect Earth. This is something that FAO developed together with Google to be able to do very detailed and very rapid assessments of tree cover, even in dryland areas where until recently this was very difficult to assess with the kind of satellite imagery and the kind of tools we had. Next slide. So with this Collect Earth tool, we did the first global assessment of tree, forest, and land use in drylands, which was published recently, and it's actually already available in English, but it will be available in French as well next month. And we're now working on the global trends on tree cover, forest, and land use, a new pilot assessment. The powerful element of Collect Earth is that you don't have to rely so much on highly expert assessment. We did this now in 30 countries, trained groups of between 10 and 20 people, and they actually can do these assessments themselves. It's based on sampling, so it's not a mapping approach, but it's a sampling approach. Basically, all the Part 1 countries to the Climate Convention are using sampling. So many points, detailed assessment. You get very much more reliable assessment at lower cost. Finally, we come to the map. So this is the map of the restoration opportunities in the map of the plots we assessed to come to the map of restoration opportunities. And you'll see there that, the assessors, they put a grid on a very detailed image, and they can actually count the individual trees. So this is how we found, in the global drylands, we found 1.11 billion hectares of forest not only, but we also found 13 billion trees estimated by this detailed assessment. And that's actually an underassessment because the assessors stopped counting trees at the number of 30. So that's actually an underassessment. And this shows you the powerful detail that you can see. Of course, the processing of these assessments doesn't happen on your laptop, but it happens in the cloud. with the facilities provided by Google. So, you know, things that you used to have to run on your computer for days on end to get the result, now they get computed in seconds away from your computer, which also allows civil society to transparently assess, you know, whether the assessments that we publish are actually accurate in their view. So it's a great tool for transparency as well. Okay, so the plot is assessed over 70 variables. We have used, for this map, we've used tree cover as an indicator of the restoration opportunity. Can also use other indicators, of course. We've stratified the landscapes based on aridity zone and land use. Of course, you know, if you're in a subhumid area with 600 millimeters, you're going to have a very different vegetation type than if you're in a near desert condition with 100 millimeters of rain a year. And then we've developed 3 scenarios for restoration, you know, low, middle, and high ambition. So here we go. This is the table that I won't bother you with. It's the technical details. Here you could see, though, one thing I will tell you is that the map, actually the greener it is, the more restoration opportunity there is. So, you know, it's a bit counterintuitive because normally you think the greener it is, the more forest there is. So here's the map. It's already published on the internet. It was put there yesterday, I think. And you could see actually that there's a lot of, so where you see the deep green color, that is where we think there's more restoration opportunity. You can see quite extensive areas in Ethiopia, Sudan, and also in Burkina, Niger, and Mali. So, core area of the Great Green Wall, 780 million hectares. Different scenarios, as Ms. Bucknell said, high scenario, 166 million hectares, but of course, you know, even the low scenario would still involve restoring 66 million hectares of land. For the Sustainable Development Goals targets, the range of restoration that we would need is between 5 and 10 million hectares a year. But of course, that does not take into account any emission reductions or emission removals targets that we might have under the climate change goal. Next steps, we're going to map and quantify the overall opportunities, and we're going to support countries based on demand. These, of course, these are regional maps. That doesn't tell you what to do in each individual country. We're already working with countries like Sudan and Senegal on developing project proposals for the Green Climate Fund to make this a reality. And, you know, we're also building new information systems with them. And of course, many of these countries already have targets, you know, land degradation neutrality, sustainable development goals, the Africa 100 commitment to restoration, so we can definitely build on that. And finally, thanks to all the organizations supporting us, including many of the African regional organizations, and of course also the World Bank and the World Resources Institute and the German Federal Ministry of Environment and Nature Conservation. I will make sure that you have this link, that we make it available through the Global Landscape Forum website so that you can find all the information you might want. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And let's just leave the map there, which is really our dream to restore all this land. And let me give a microphone to Magda Lovey, that is practice manager for the Africa region for the World Bank, and she's going to moderate the panel. Thank you, Magda.
Thank you very much, Paula. It is really my pleasure to be here, and particularly a pleasure to introduce a very distinguished panel who is going to respond to some questions and reflect on what we have heard so far on the opportunities and the potentials for improving the resilience of drylands in Africa, and particularly to work on exciting and very energizing initiatives such as the Great Green Wall initiative. So let me now introduce the panel, and I would like the panel members to please come on the podium in the order that they hear their names. First, I would like to ask Mr. Abderrahim Houmi, who is Secretary General of the Main Commission for Water and Forest of Morocco. Thank you very much, Mr. Houmi. Welcome. Second, I would like to introduce His Excellency Dr. Hassan Hilal, Minister of Environment for Rural Development and Physical Planning from Sudan. Third, I would like to ask Mr. Harrison Canvea, Managing Director of Forest and Development Authority from Liberia. Thank you very much. I would like to ask now Mauro Agnelletti, Vice Chair of the FAO's globally important agricultural heritage systems. That's a very long name. Thank you very much, Mauro. Next, Mr. Horst Feinberg, Head of Division for Forest Conservation and Sustainable Management of Forests, Biological Diversity and Climate Change from the German Federal Ministry for the Environment. Gentlemen, may I ask you to maybe sit in the order that you were asked to come up, just so that I don't get completely confused. So first, His Excellency Houmi, second, His Excellency Mr. Hilal, third, Managing, and could we start? Thank you so much. Yeah, sorry about that. We have exactly as many chairs as we have speakers. All right, where are we? I would like to call Mr. Greg Hansen, Global Director for Food, Forest and Water from the World Resources Institute. Felicite Yameogo, representative of the Women's Shea Cooperative from Burkina Faso. And Mr. Mamadou Diakite, Team Leader for Sustainable Land and Water Management from the Africa Union's NEPAD agency. Please give a big round of applause to the panel. Welcome. So let me ask first His Excellency Houmi, your country hosting COP22. And so obviously there is a lot of interest here on landscapes and how Morocco is approaching some of the key challenges of climate change, specifically on the climate resiliency and landscapes. How do you see Morocco's approach to restoration, and how do you see the initiatives that exist, such as the Great Green Wall, in terms of Morocco's participation? And I don't know if any of you might need a headset for translation. Maybe we could get somebody to bring a few headsets in case any of you would want to speak French or English and need translation. Yeah, okay. So could we ask somebody to bring some headsets, please? In the meantime, I'm going to... yeah.
Yes, yes, okay.
Can I get... yeah, can you give everybody on the panel? So I think we are getting settled.
Okay.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, please.
Okay, thank you, merci. Tout d'abord, je tiens à préciser que je suis
say
forum qui se tient en marge de la COP22 à Marrakech. Évidemment, le Maroc est honoré d'organiser cette grande manifestation planétaire. J'espère que tout le monde se plaît à Marrakech avec ce temps magnifique et aussi avec toute cette animation qui se fait autour de cet événement. Par rapport à la question que vous avez posée, et je pense que c'est une question bien sûr qui demandera beaucoup de temps pour l'aborder, mais je vais essayer un peu d'être très synthétique. Le Maroc est un pays, comme vous avez remarqué, qui est soumis à des effets du climat aride et semi-aride, dans 92%. Donc nous avons très peu d'espace ou de zones favorables, à climat favorable. Donc, et nous avons aussi un pays qui est très sensible à la désertification. Biodiversité, érosion éolienne et hydrique, bien sûr, mais aussi une pression humaine, parce que les espaces au Maroc sont souvent habités, donc il y a une pression humaine aussi qui est manifeste. Donc par rapport à toutes ces données, évidemment, le Maroc est très sensible à la problématique des changements climatiques et à la lutte contre la désertification. Et c'est pour cela que, politiquement et sur le plan institutionnel, il y a un département très spécialisé dans cette question et qui a un statut un peu particulier, du fait que c'est un département qui ne ressemble pas aux autres ministères, mais c'est un haut commissariat aux eaux et forêts, à la lutte contre la désertification. Et l'idée derrière, surtout, c'est de pouvoir avoir une vision et une possibilité d'une vision continue dans le temps, parce que, comme vous le savez, ces questions ne sont pas des questions qui peuvent répondre à des mandats électoraux, mais plutôt à un mandat écologique qui, souvent, il est très lent et qui transcende les autres temps. Donc, comment le...
on an election agenda, they do depend, of course, on continuous global actions and contexts. Now, we have a number of major stakes. These major stakes, and that is very closely linked to the land management. It is actually the issue of water. It is actually very important, because when we're talking about aridity or dryness, we're talking about the lack of water. Now, with this regard, we find ourselves constrained to anything related to water mobilization, but it is also important to work upstream on the different areas around the catchment basins, and that is why in Morocco, starting from the mid-1990s, we set for an objective to assess the challenges of the hydric erosion with relation to the dams, and we actually identified 1.5 million hectares of fragile areas that needed to be actually addressed in a emergency fashion. So starting from 1996, an execution program was launched, and up to our days, we have actually worked on 850,000 hectares. We have not covered everything, but this is what our priorities and urgent proceedings are. So there is this major stake, and in order to manage these spaces, we do not want this to be only a purely technical approach, but we want it actually to be connected and well adapted to the socio-economic aspects. Hence the fact that all the projects that have been carried out in different areas have actually been done in terms of reforestation and the mechanical basins, as we needed to integrate the social part so as to reconciliate the local communities and their milieu. So it is an important stake, because the human behaviors do, of course, impact the issues related to land management and the vegetal cover. Now, beyond this major stake, which is the water issue, there is, of course, the issue of reforestation as a whole. And I think that in Morocco, through a substantial effort in terms of reforestation, Morocco has actually managed reversing the situation. We were actually on the trend of losing forest land, but since last year we have started actually expanding the forest land, which we consider as a good start towards success. I'm not saying that this was an easy task. It was very complex. It still is. We needed to manage the technical, the human, financial aspects, but we had to actually carry out a integrated approach which allowed actually moving forward. Now, when we talk about reforestation and about actually putting the necessary impetus to be positive, and maybe this is a very local reasoning, we are said, let's protect what we let's protect first what we have. Now, this is quite pertinent, because we need to protect the existing. But there are two dimensions. There's the social dimension. We need to find, I would say, a peaceful link between the forest land and the local communities. We need to organize the population in the shape of cooperatives and associations, so that they become the stewards and the protectors of those spaces, because they benefit from those spaces. There are also just as important stakes with regards to the existing, that is actually the fight against forest fires. In Africa, with regards to these areas, although this is something that is not very much recurrent, but I think that we have to put more efforts into preserving the existing, because some fires in some areas would actually push the ecosystems to the extremes, and I would say towards irreversible scenario. That's why Morocco has actually put together an adaptation plan that has allowed better managing the risks, but also to be proactive and also to be with regards to fire forests. We started in the 1980s with an indicator that we would call the burnt emergence by the launching of the fire, which has actually diminished. So this is a technical vision, but that is also social with a very important political support. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
His Excellency me. I'm so glad that you refer to not only the technical aspects of reforestation and rehabilitation of degraded lands, but also some of the complexities about the social and institutional aspects as well, which is really very important. I would like to now turn to His Excellency Dr. Hassan Hilal from Sudan. Sudan is clearly in that dry zone, and I'm wondering if you could tell us what you expect from restoration. How do you see the FAO work on the opportunities helping you? How do you see your opportunities for such endeavor?
Well, thank you very much. In fact, the problem of desertification in Sudan, in the region, in Africa, is a very serious phenomenon. Very serious, very drastic situation due to problems of climate change, lack of rainfall, insufficient rain and water in such dry lands. I have, in fact, a paper which is very, I think, elaborated and comprehensive, but I can go through that only the topics. I have environmental setting for the whole area of Sudan and the region, and I have the causes, what are the causes of desertification, and then some recommendations to give out to the audience. So our problem of desertification is due to lack of water, problems of land degradation, problems of vegetation degradation. Now we have some initiatives, for example, the Great African Green Wall, which is a very important initiative. As we said, it is not rows of trees, it is a system of life. Sudan now, I think the Great Green Wall lies mostly in Sudan, with the length of 1,520 kilometers length and 25 kilometers width. This will be a system of life, livelihood, villages, markets, some services for the people. We started that 2 years back. Now we are achieving a lot. This will cover about 11 states in Sudan out of 18. Now we are on the 6th state, which is a very good and important experience. And we think that desertification is a great enemy because it hinders the development in Sudan. It hinders the improvement of our capabilities, economic, social, and political. Also, the incomes of the people are highly affected by this problem of desertification. Now, poverty is the most driving factor. Desertification is the result of maybe poverty, human activities, and climatic conditions. So we are suffering from climate change greatly. Climate change is the result of most of the conflicts and wars in Sudan, because people are just quarreling around insufficient or diminishing resources. This conflict by the pastoralists and agriculturists is around diminishing resources. And these diminishing resources are continuing to diminish. And so I think I am calling for a networking, international networking, covering the international communities with the local communities, with the people, with the environmentalists, with the NGOs, and the local communities should be on board, because I believe on the social fencing, that the social fencing will cover environment. It is not the government. We can't protect that by force. We can't enforce a decision, but we can spread and disseminate the culture of environment between the people, the awareness of the people, the enlightenment of the people. And this is the role of the Minister of Environment, and it is my role to disseminate this culture, because environment problems, desertification, land degradation, all these represent a cultural crisis, cultural problems, human activities, climatic conditions, problems of a continuous degradation, and this will widen the space of dry lands in Sudan and in Africa. So our job is, I think, is very, it is a very long and continuous job, very hard job, but not impossible. We can build on the lessons learned. So causes of the desertification are different. This is the etiology, this is the cause of the disease, but the disease is there. We have to fight the disease itself. Poverty is the main driving force, as I said, for all these things. So now I have some recommendations to avoid this very serious problem. I have a conclusion. This is the impact of the desertification process, but desertification constitutes a major constraint to sustainable land use, because it reduces the productive capacity of the land over time. The predominant desertification process in Sudan, vegetation, degradation, wind erosion, and salinization, solidification. Sustainable land use is a prerequisite of sustainable biological production and hence sustainable development. Combating desertification through a NAP, the NAP, National Adaptation this is the way forward to land use sustainability. There is an urgent need to establish an institutional organization for cooperation, coordination, and networking. This is very important. I am calling for that, for networking and working between stakeholders to effectively and efficiently combat desertification. And 6, establishment of a national regional desertification network for coordination and cooperation with stakeholders in research and implementation of combating desertification projects. So these are the most important topics I just want to cover, and I just want to repeat that this is one of the greatest enemies we are facing in our country. Thank you very much.
Excellency Hilal. That was a very passionate call for not only action, but also learning from each other and creating networks. I think some networks already exist. A few years back, about 10 years ago, Terra Africa was established to create some platform, such platform for countries to come together and share experiences. Maybe we'll hear later about how we can revive and reform some of these networks. I'm also glad that you mentioned the connection with security and poverty. Clearly, this is a key at the heart of the work that is being proposed. Our next panelist, Managing Director Harrison Canvea. Your country has already been cited as not on the map of the Great Green Wall. It is not exactly on the dry zone. It's just on the edge of it. But you do have a very ambitious landscape management program. How do you see the lessons being relevant for other countries on the Great Green Wall area? And is there a connection, perhaps through the migration from drylands to Liberia, which clearly connects with the previous speaker's notes?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Magda. Yes, certainly. Liberia is not in that zone, but we've started to see the very thing that they have seen. Northwestern Liberia in the Foya area is seeing savanna descending from Guinea and Sierra Leone. Do we wait until we become the Sudan? No. So the best thing to do is to start to tackle it from beginning. What we've started to do, and with support from our partners from the World Bank and Norway, is to try to restore those savanna areas immediately and ensure that we improve on our agricultural practices. Liberia's major driver of deforestation is the farming that we do. We do slash and burn, shifting from place to place. For instance, I was born in Nimba County, and at the time I was a young man. Forest was all around my town, and monkeys were even coming into the backyard and eating. Today, there's nothing. We got all rubber farm and other things. So Liberia needs to start now, and we are taking the bull by the horn. The landscape approach, we are now trying to practice sustainable agriculture. Of course, it doesn't happen without the necessary funding. We are grateful again, like I said, to the World Bank and to the Norwegian government that we, the Liberia Forest Sector Project, will be working in 2 major landscapes in Liberia, in the south and southeast and in the west. The intent is to ensure that first we go ahead with our 3C practices, which is the commercial, the community, and the conservation aspect of our forestry practices, and of course the 4th C, the carbon aspect. So we've committed ourselves to setting aside 30% of our remaining forests as parks and reserves, while at the same time practicing sustainable forestry in other parts of the area, improving on our agriculture. Today, Liberia is one of several countries from Central and West Africa that will be signing the Marrakesh Declaration on palm oil. The intent is that if you plant palm oil in that savanna area, you are helping to restore a folded, degraded area. At the same time, instead of doing nucleus estate, we are empowering the communities to be able to be a part of the owners of the wealth that is coming to our country. So the landscape approach not only go into tree crops alone, food crops to support the communities so that they too can feed themselves properly and sell some of their excess foodstuff. We will not wait until the savanna reaches into central Liberia before we can start to do something. Liberia is one of the smallest countries in West Africa, but the biggest forest country, still holding 43% of the Upper Guinea ecosystem. So we have to be careful. The whole world is focused on us maintaining that forest. And we think that the best way to go is the landscape practice, which is eating some and leaving some, and trying to restore some of the degraded ones. By so doing, we will be contributing to mitigating global warming, climate change. We will be helping ourselves to adapt to the effect of all of those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Managing Director. I think your leadership on the landscape approach and restoration and the forest program in Liberia has been really exemplary. And clearly lessons and the connections are there with the drylands and landscape programs on the Great Green Wall. We have heard 3 country perspectives, all very passionate and very forward-looking on how to move forward with landscape management and landscape restoration. Now I would like to ask Mauro Agnoletti. We have heard a lot about the importance of heritage landscapes. You are the vice chair of the globally important agriculture heritage systems in FAO. Tell us a little bit about how your organization can help with this broad vision that is not only Great Green Wall in Sub-Saharan Africa, but expansion and really taking the heritage and the connectivity to further north and maybe further south.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and also thank you for the question. And the initiative which you have been mentioning start from the idea that so far perhaps we are not taking care of the fact that all these realities that you are describing, which means basically different cultures and different parts of the world, have developed a relationship with agriculture that had created a set of value that are part of their history and the part of the way they are surviving. So in other terms, if you're considering the notion of heritage landscape, we are speaking about a history of co-evolution between people with their environment. So this means that we are speaking about 2 basic notions, which is one, the time dimension, and the other is the space. So this is basically why we speak about heritage landscape. Of course, in this FAO initiative, we are considering some of values incorporated in this concept. First of all, these sites and also the criteria with which you can subscribe to this program deal with food and livelihood security. So all these areas in the world are providing this, and we need to be sure that these are good examples for this. Then they are also important for the biodiversity, and in this sense I would like to clarify that we are speaking of a concept of biodiversity that's closer to the concept expressed by the UNESCO CBD joint program on the linkages between cultural and biological diversity, more specifically biocultural diversity. So this area that can be agriculture area, forest area, or pastoral area have in common this long history of human intervention. And so this is creating a different kind of biodiversity, which is the result of this. And this is very much linked to the traditional practices, and so to the local knowledge system, that is also one of the things we are taking care of, as well as the culture of all these different population, and also the landscape value. In other terms, we have seen across the world, not only in developing countries, but also in many developed countries, that we have an extraordinary varied example of adaptation to difficult environmental conditions. So the environment has forced the population to develop ways of adapting for surviving. And so since these climatic conditions are already so different, this is an extraordinary example from which we can learn something. So taking care of this example and studying them is giving them some useful information in view of our effort to adapt and mitigate climate change. And some of this knowledge system has not been assessed at scientific level. For example, we can explain a system like we have here in Morocco on the Atlas Mountain, like dry stone terraces. There are obviously a way of cultivating steep slope on the mountain. Well, this sometimes is the only way you can cultivate there. And we've seen that in countries where we are using big tractors on steep slope, we are creating a lot of erosion. So of course, in this area, this probably is the only way you can survive and cultivate and reduce erosion. Of course, these are labor-intensive systems that require also the help of the institution for supporting the population. And the same thing we can say about all the oasis system we have been talking also this morning. The key point in this system is the use of the water. We know that in this area there are rich historical tradition of surviving with such small amount of water that for countries like the one I'm coming from are unthinkable. I mean, no farmers in Italy or in Europe will think of surviving with the amount of water they use in the oasis system. Nevertheless, they've been able to turn these places into gardens. Of course, they are fragile area, but this way of adapting and this system has really a deep wisdom inside. And so the fact that we are taking care of all these different situations is helping us from a way to collect information for what we are trying to fight, which is climate change, but the other way, taking care of the local culture and see that any kind of development approach that we are using is not going to destroy this relationship between culture and environment, because we see that the landscape project without taking care of this relationship is going to fail. It will not last for long.
Thank you very much, Mauro. I think you, indeed, the connection with the nature, culture, history, and how to integrate that into an approach for managing sustainably these areas is really essential and very much in line with what we heard from the ministers before. Now, let me turn to Horst, who is the father or the champion of the Bonn Challenge. And the Bonn Challenge really challenges countries to set targets and then work towards that targets. It sounds as if it's a forest restoration agenda, but can you tell us a little bit how that links with the previous speaker's ambition, and where are the people?
Thank you. Is it working? Is it working? Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for that interesting, really question. And I come first to your father. I'm honored, definitely, that with the Bonn Challenge I became fourth-time father. And I'm definitely more honored that you did not call me grandfather. So this is something something which I wanted to share with you. So no, thank you. The Bonn Challenge, I think, you questioned me about the relation to the former speakers. let me give you first a clear indication about the Bonn Challenge. When we started the Bonn Challenge in 2011, I think the time was ripe when we combined two political processes. The Biodiversity Convention decided on the Aichi targets in Nagoya, and the Climate Change Convention decided on the plus, on the red plus. So political processes like these, and I'm part of the delegations who negotiated all these different topics, always require then concrete implementation. So we use that for the Bonn Challenge to integrate both targets into the concept on forest and landscape restoration. The Bonn Challenge identified and agreed on a target in 2011 on to restore 150 million hectares until 2020. In my view today, nobody at that time really expected that it could have that impact. But I think it helped many countries and governments and regions to identify landscape restoration as a major political topic and to work with it. And the Bonn Challenge is linking biodiversity and climate change and restoration and enhancing of carbon stocks, but it is not purely about biodiversity and enhancement of carbon stocks, not purely about climate change. It integrates, and I like very much what Pavan Chukdev, when he was the coordinator of the international TEEP study, said, and this is, I think, our guiding idea behind the Bonn Challenge, to restore ecosystem services. And this means it is more than only biodiversity, which is important for resilience. It is more than only carbon from the plus of the red plus. We provided and gave an interpretation. It is integrating people. And what my former speaker said, I think this is a key. You can't do restoration without bringing people into the ownership, into empower people to become drivers of restoration, that they have a benefit. So in my view also, access and benefit sharing for people in doing restoration is a critical element which we have to consider for any successful restoration and sustainable restoration activity, which contributes at the end of the day, of course, to the Sustainable Development Goals 15. Which inspired, and I'm sure about that all what happened with Bonn, after Bonn, restoration was not new, but Bonn gave light to international political discussions that restoration is a topic. New York Declaration extended the 150 million to 350 million hectares. That everything what we do has to do with exactly sustainable development in the future. And only last word on that. The Bonn Challenge and what in the second Bonn Challenge last year, we saw a huge interest by regions in taking over the global goal for their own regional purposes, in getting that down to their local needs, to their regional needs. In Central America, Latin America, we have now the second regional Bonn Challenge, next year the third. In Africa, we saw in Rwanda the first African regional Bonn Challenge, integrating part of the AFR 100 initiative, which is a translation of the Bonn Challenge in Africa. And we will see next year in February the first regional Bonn Challenge in Southeast Asia, in South Sumatra. And in Central America, we have 3 new Bonn Challenges in 2017, 18, 19 ahead of us. So I think there is a strong ownership now on giving restoration a concrete phase in the different regions based on the needs. And I finish here with saying restoration is an open concept, I think, in my belief. It's nothing which is, it is a technique, but it is not something which is in narrow frames. It has to recognize the needs by every single place or community, whoever is doing restoration. And restoration can appear in different ways and can start in different ways. It is about ecosystem service restoration, and it is about livelihood improvement, it is about food security, and it is about job creation. I think this is a message which I would wanted to like to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Horst. I think it's really excellent that you clarified that indeed the bond challenge is not a technical term. It is very much along the lines of what all of our panelists have referred to, including people's livelihood, including biodiversity, ecosystem conservation, and really the integrated landscape management. That's excellent. Craig, at WRI, you are looking at the bond challenge implementation, but specifically, Horst already mentioned the Africa-specific bond challenge, AFR 100. How do you see the possibility for that big ambition to happen in Africa, and how do we see the monitoring aspects playing a role in this?
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. For those of you that don't know, the Africa Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, also called AFR 100, it's a country-led effort to accelerate the restoration of 100 million hectares of degraded land in Africa for food security, for livelihoods, for climate, for biodiversity. It's for the whole holistic view, as we were just saying. And I think, as one of the earlier speakers talked about, it doesn't live on its own. It lives in an ecosystem of change that actually is alive and well in the region. The AFR 100 supports the Bond Challenge. It supports the African Resilient Landscapes Initiative as well. It also builds upon all the great work that Terra Africa has been doing for a long time as well. So none of these actually live in isolation. They work together, which I think they have to, right, to succeed. I think embedded in your question are a couple of things. One is, 100 million hectares, that's a lot. How do you get there? And we did some analysis a couple of years ago with IUCN looking at successful restoration efforts throughout history as well as unsuccessful ones. We identified three things that we saw, three major themes that come together for success. So first, you need to inspire. Decision makers from the top down to the people on the ground, the farmers, need to be inspired to actually restore. They have to have a business case or a political case to actually take action. Secondly, and I think we have that, right, with 64 million hectares already being committed to the Bond Challenge. We have just another third of the way to go. 64 million hectares for the AFR 100, 120 million hectares for the Bond Challenge. We're more than halfway there on those. People are being inspired. Secondly, you need the right enabling conditions in place. You can be inspired, but if the enabling conditions aren't in place for change, no matter what people do, it won't take off at scale. And these are the ecological conditions, where are the seeds going to come from? Is there a source population nearby? You need the right policies in place. What does land tenure look like? Are landowners or land managers incentivized if they restore? Do they get to reap the benefits of what they actually restored? You need to get the right institutions in place. Is the national government working well with the local government? Are there civil society engagement institutions in place to make this a reality? And finally, you also need to have the right social conditions in place, the social processes to get engaged. Again, restoration fundamentally is about people, not about the vegetation or the trees. That comes afterwards. So first is inspire, second is enable, and third is to implement. And implementation is critical. It takes financing, it takes markets for the goods and services that get created once you restore landscapes. It takes technical know-how, and in all these partnerships, I'm pleased to see all these technical, both global and local institutions coming together to provide their advice and lessons learned from elsewhere to make this happen. And finally, on implementation, it takes mobilizing millions of people to take action. No small task, but necessary for success. And the final one on implementation is monitoring. You mentioned monitoring here. I think monitoring is really, really important for a couple of reasons. First of all, you can monitor where restoration is starting to take off. It actually creates a virtuous circle of motivation, because if people can actually see where restoration is taking off, you can see the image of before and after. It really encourages people that, yes, this can be done, right? At the same time, monitoring is important for identifying where we're falling short. We put a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of person power in a certain area to restore that landscape, and monitoring can tell you if it's not happening. And so you realize, well, something's going wrong here. We need to adjust our strategy and change. And you can't do that unless you have monitoring. And finally, a lot of people talk about monitoring being monitoring of the trees and the vegetation coming back. That's important. But I also think we need to go even further and monitor the flow of the goods and services that are coming back through restoration. Who's benefiting from what, right? You also need to monitor the social and the economic benefits that actually are coming through restoration as well. It's not just about the trees, it's about a whole suite, an ecosystem of services. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So we heard a lot about the visions, the ambitions, the technical issues, the lessons learned. I would like to welcome the only woman on the panel, who is not only the only woman on the panel, but also a very, very remarkable woman who made it in the business of shea butter production. And that is something that tells us that restoration and reforestation, forest management is not only about overall planting trees, managing landscapes, but also making business out of the landscape. And having that succeed as a woman, I think it really deserves special attention. So I hope next time we have a panel, we will have more women here and more of those who have succeeded in this. So Felicite, tell us, you are really an extraordinary woman who made it in this business. You are called Maman Karite. How did you do it? And tell us, I mean, we heard about the need for inspiration, the need for empowerment. How do you see those things happening in the real life on the ground where you operate? Thank you.
Merci. Thank you very much. As you say, you see that I am the only woman, which means a lot. I am the only woman amongst so many and actually the shea butter branch actually is 400 women. But currently this actually activity is liable to or inclined to be dominated by men. That is why I am fighting. And God gave us our cocoa, so we need to take care of it. Now, when it comes to the shea butter, it is something that we need and that helps us. But we are facing some problems in terms of its regeneration, for its processing, because we're told that transformation or processing, the traditional way, does not produce any, knowing that actually this traditional process, traditional processing methods do actually provide livelihood to tens of thousands of people. And of course, this also does affect wood, and I've been fighting actually to protect the forest wood for years, but they tell me that I am dreaming, because with the wood that we use, we want actually to transform it into renewable energy, so as to fight against desertification. We want to replace it, meant the orator. So we actually have set up teams that are going to carry out awareness raising, not only for stakeholders, but for the governments, for the communities, so that people take and build awareness of this tree of life. We also know that this project is actually going to be beneficial. As we know, there are some kind of reserved area where there is a high productivity of shea butter. These forest territories will be actually sensed. So, and then the women will be empowered to actually manage them so as to plant trees for the production or the farming of shea butter. Currently, the shea butter activities give a living to dozens of thousands of women. And if we do not preserve this, we are going to lose not only the species, but also the quality of the product. Because we, in our activities, may shorten the lifetime of the trees, because unfortunately, a lot of women actually, and a lot of people cut those trees because they provide higher temperatures. It's a better wood for actually cooking. So that's why I want biogas to be replacing the use of the dead wood. Of course, it's not easy because it's an immense project, but it could be actually be transferred in to all the types of trees. This project can be transferred, so it is a steering project, and we are trying to find out how to establish the signature of conventions between the states and the cooperatives. Thank you.
This is really the inspirational story, and the one that talks about the empowerment and the possibilities that exist for women and for local communities to take this agenda in their own hands. Now, let me go to back a little bit on the regional frameworks that exist. Many countries, we heard, are very interested in the forest restoration and landscape restoration agenda. There is a need for connecting the countries and learning from each other. There are already existing frameworks. We heard about Terra Africa. It's already more than 10 years old now. The NEPAD agency has been the secretariat for that initiative, as well as now the center of the AFR 100 initiatives. These are very connected initiatives. How, Mamadou, as the team leader for coordination, how do you see NEPAD's role, and how do you see these initiatives growing and connecting more and more countries on the continent?
Thank you very much, Magda and World Bank, for this invitation. And I see Paula smiling also. And I like when there is interpretation, so I can speak in French to also create a balance, gender balance and language balance. Merci beaucoup de cette invitation.
Thank you for this invitation. I'm going to, as Magda said, I will place this into the regional framework, so as to say that when we're working on restoration, we have benefited from a well-defined mandate from the African Union in October 2010. The Technical Committee of the African Union has mandated us to federate, coordinate the work on restoration, and that's why I very much liked the intervention of our colleague from the Bonn channels, who said that restoration is a concept. It is an invitation, as even if the whole audience here would actually endeavor into carrying out restoration, well, that would not be enough. And I need to say that there was a bad generation of those restoration projects. They don't come from the middle of nowhere. It was, Magda has actually reminded us that there are a number of countries that are members of this platform, like the National Terra Africa platform, that will bring together all the concerned ministries, agriculture, water management, the environment, so as to put together a very precise investment strategy for the sustainable management of lands and water. Now, the new initiative, such as the GGW, the AFR 100 that was launched last year. All those initiatives are based on older ones, such as Terra Africa. Now, we, as an organization attached to the African Union, we invite the countries that are not yet members of Terra Africa or IFAD 100 to join the initiative. I mentioned 27 countries of Terra Africa. I could mention also Craig Laddie as a partner of the initiative. That up to this day, 21 African countries are AFR 100 members, and they do actually stand for 63 million hectares that are planned to be restored and returned to economic productivity. We have had meetings with some countries here, and we hope we can increase the number of countries adhering to this initiative that starts from the Bonn challenge, and that is also based on the New York Declaration of Forests. So we insistently call on a wider adherence as well as technical and financial support. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Mama.
The role that regional institutions such as NEPAD and of course the African Union plays in bringing together and elevating the agenda to the highest levels. So I would like to thank very much for the panel. I think it was a very inspirational set of interventions from countries as well as from development partners and grassroots communities and people who represent a wide range of coalition that is needed for this agenda to really happen. So I would like to please give a round of applause to our panel. Thank you so much, His Excellencies, partners, ladies and gentlemen. Excellent that you could join us. It's a very busy time, so we know that you have lots of commitments, and we really appreciate it. And so I would like to hand it over to Paula.
Thank you very much, Magda. Panel, please stay 5 more minutes. I would like to invite on the podium Elvis Tangem, the coordinator of the Great Green Wall for the African Union. Elvis, if you can just get to the microphone there and give us a few words on how we can see this, the Great Green Wall, the Sahel and the Sahara working together for even bigger Great Green Wall. Just 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Paula. My minister, Your Excellencies, distinguished gentlemen, Mama Karite, I'm very happy to see you here. We work together in Burkina for long. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and for the opportunity from the World Bank and partners. Just to say the Great Green Wall, as you know, is one of the flagship programs of the Africa Union Commission. And my colleague, Mamadou Diakité, have mentioned it. Just to give a brief about what the African Union is doing within the framework of the Great Green Wall and the perspective, what is in the pipeline. The Great Green Wall is there. The minister said everybody knows that it's not planting of tree is not an agroforestry program. As the minister said this morning, it's a system, it's a livelihood system. And so the Great Green Wall is very important. It's very important for the continent. It's very important for everything. We know about the emerging issues of land degradation. We know about issues of migration. We know about issues of conflict, extremism linked to poverty, internally displaced people, and all what we know. And so the Great Green Wall came about because of this, of the issues in the 80s of erosion, drylands, and all the impact on it. Since 2005, the African Union and its member states have been working at establishing this Great Green Wall, and it's been extremely well received. We know all about what the World Bank, FAO, the European Union, UNFCCC, and all our other partners are doing to make sure that this dream that was started by one of our heads of state, the then head of state of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and his friend Abdullahi Wade, is becoming a reality. What I just want to say that the Great Green Wall have really been one of those programs that have brought the issue of land degradation and desertification to the limelight. It has pushed the agenda to the countries especially. A lot of countries are now putting millions of dollars for land restoration issues. Currently, we have many countries that have been asking on how they can become part of this Great Green Wall, because they have seen what, not only the implementation on the ground, but also the political engagements of their countries. So it's very interesting. It's all part of the global drive for land restoration, as we have seen, as many of our speakers have said. So what are the next steps for the Great Green Wall at the level of the African Union? The African Union, we know the mandate of the African Union is political, it's diplomacy, it's lobbying, it's advocacy for the continent. That is what we know how to do best. And that is the mandate that we are going to step it up within the framework of land restoration initiative in Africa. The next thing is to focus more on our mandate, which is about continuing with making land restoration and the challenges of land degradation and climate change to remain very relevant within the political and diplomatic cycle, both at the level of Africa and our global partners. We just put up what we call the Regional Coordination Hub, and we'll make sure that it becomes very effective. Another thing that we'll be doing now is to looking at the issues of emerging issues, the new issues. Next year, the development thing of Africa will be on demographic dividends. We need to look how to get our young people to be more interested in issues of land restoration and land degradation. That is a very big hole. It's a big gap. The young people, if you look, the young people still see it as some sort of a dirty job for farmers and foresters. We need to look for ways to get our young people to get involved in this fight. And another thing that the Commission will be doing next year is to look more at this issue of emerging issues like the peace, the conflict, natural resource-based conflict. Yes, a few days ago, the 3SG group was launched, security, sustainability, and stability in Africa in relation with land issues, the challenges of natural resources and land degradation. We're going to work on that. At the Union, we have the Peace and Security Department, we have the Social Department, we have all these departments that we are not talking together. When we focus more on our mandate, we'll make sure that we bring all these departments together so that once we are sitting here, we will not only be a bunch of people who are involved in natural resource management, we can also have the commissioners, those who are responsible for peace, for security, and for social affairs. I think for now, those are our plans, and we'll make sure that at the level of the continent, land restoration, land degradation, the opportunities and challenges remain very relevant as we've been doing, but this time we'll step it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alice. And with this sort of blessing from the African Union, let me bring this to a closure because it's getting really late. We have so many other questions, but we will ask them to you during the coffee break. So just to wrap it up, so we heard a lot of interesting things. We heard from Morocco that landscape restoration for them, it's not only a matter of climate change, but it's actually a matter of economic development. He was talking about the soil erosion, the dams, vegetation, and how landscape restoration can help that. We heard from the Minister of Environment of Sudan how this is, restoration, it's about a system of life, bringing the element of people into it, and that was incredibly important, and about security as well. We heard from the Managing Director of the Forest Development Authority of Liberia that they are trying to do landscape restoration, even if they're not a dryland country right now, is because they want to be proactive, and the savanna is coming down to them, and they don't want to just sit and wait. They are doing landscape restoration now to avoid becoming drier. We heard from Mauro Agnoletti about the concept of heritage landscape and how the co-evolution of the human and the environments and all the tradition on how to deal in the oasis, for example, or here even in Morocco, terracing, it's a key element to succeed in landscape restoration. We heard from Horst that he is yes, maybe the father of a bond challenge, not the grandfather, but no, apart from the jokes of how important landscape restoration is now for the SDG 15, that it collects it all together under, you know, forest, biodiversity, livelihoods, ecosystems, and it's really helping the implementation of a very important the Sustainable Development Goal number 15. We heard from Craig, what do we need to be successful for landscape restoration? We need inspirations, we need enabling environment, we need to start implementation. And we are there already with many of those things, but we can do even more. And when we heard from Madame Félicité that restorations and working in these drylands can actually be a very successful business, and women can be empowered, and we can do even more. And if we can, use less water, if we can understand the economic value of the shade trees for the value chain they provide, and not for using them for other purposes like charcoal. We heard from Mamadou, the coordinator of Africa 100 in Inter-Africa in NEPAD, about the role that NEPAD has in really implementing and bringing together in a coordinated way all the different initiatives that are trying to make this landscape more resilient, from the Africa Resilient Landscape Initiative to the Africa 100 to the Terra Africa, etc. And we are really working all together. And finally, of course, from the African Union and Elvis about this dream of a Great Green Wall, which is inspiring many countries, and many countries are really trying now to be part of it. So I think that with this inspiration, we started with the map that FAO has produced that showed us the opportunities for landscape restoration, both in North Africa and in the Sahel and in the Sahara. I think we can really work together, and we can really work on this heritage landscape to make sure that the connectivity, human and from ecological, between these two areas is enhanced, preserved, and make a better life for everybody. Thank you very much to this distinguished panel. Thank you for the young people we had in trying to send out the yellow stickers. The question will be answered online. Thank you to our wall sketcher. All your remarks are sketched in this wall, which will also be put online. And also to all the people that are on following us on via internet or tweet. Most of them could not be here with us this time. The Global Landscape Forum went really big online. So an applause for everybody, and think landscapes.